Every morning, long before the sun climbed over the hills, Eleanor Mayfield stepped out onto her porch with a blanket draped around her shoulders and a steaming cup of tea in her hand. She was 81, wrinkled, weathered, and mostly alone. Her small house sat on the highest ridge of Maple Ridge Valley, looking over 30 acres of land that had belonged to her family for generations. The fields were mostly empty, nowge, swaying grass, scattered trees, and old wooden fences falling apart at the edges. Most people saw weeds. She saw history. Locals called her Crazy Ellie. Kids dared each other to run across her fields at night. Some claimed they saw her talking to the wind or humming to the ground. They never saw what she saw. When the wind moved just right, Eleanor claimed she could hear voices in the trees. When fog kissed the dirt, she said the land hummed softly like it remembered something the rest of the world had forgotten. She had told the town council, he had written letters, even invited geologists once, but no one listened. They all said the same thing. "It's just dirt, Mrs. Mayfield." One young man laughed in her face at the farmer's market. "That land's so special. Why's it never done anything?" She just looked out at her ridge that morning and whispered, "You'll show them. One day." Inside her home, Eleanor's walls were covered in old photos. Black and white portraits of her grandfather standing beside a horse-drawn plow, her father in uniform, her husband Arthur, holding a radio headset with a patch that read, U.S. Airborne Recon. Arthur had died 47 years ago, but she still made 2 cups of tea each morning. One for her, one for him. "Morning, Art," she said softly. "Still no sign, but I know what I saw. 'Cause 50 years ago, Arthur had told her something he wasn't supposed to say. It was a summer evening, and he'd come home from a mission with a look in his eyes she didn't recognize. He sat her down, placed a folded map on the kitchen table, and pointed to a dot on the edge of their land. "They're watching it," he said. "Who?" She asked. "The government." "Why?" Looked at her long and hard. "Because it's not normal. It's ground, it's reacting to something." Eleanor never forgot those words. The next week, Arthur's team was reassigned overseas. 3 months later, he was gone. Plane crash. No body recovered. The Army called it a classified training mission. The rest of the world moved on. But Eleanor stayed, and so did the land. Every few years, someone knocked on her door, offering to buy the property. Developers, oil companies, even a man with a badge who never said which agency he worked for. Each time, she said the same thing. "This land has purpose. I'm just waiting for it to remember." The neighbors rolled their eyes. The town labeled her odd, but she didn't mind. She just kept waiting. And then, one afternoon, 50 years to the day since Arthur's last mission, something changed. The wind stopped. The birds vanished. The air grew heavy, still. And then came the sound no one expected. A low thump, 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 echoing through the valley. A helicopter. But not just any helicopter. It wasn't marked. It wasn't local. And it wasn't headed for the hospital. It hovered directly over Eleanor's land. The sound grew louder. Low, deep, heavy. Thump, thump. Eleanor stepped off her porch, teacup in hand, her eyes lifted to the sky. She wasn't startled. She wasn't afraid. If anything, her breath slowed like she'd been expecting this moment her entire life. The helicopter wasn't like the ones used by medics or farmers. It was matte black, with no visible numbers or flags. Sleek, quiet despite its size. It hovered low over the eastern ridge of her land right above the spot Arthur had pointed to all those years ago. And then it just stopped midair. Not circling, not landing, just hovering as if scanning the ground below. Eleanor's hands trembled slightly as she placed the cup on the porch railing. She stepped forward with both hands open, palms upward, like someone greeting an old friend. "I told you," she whispered. "You came back." She didn't know who was flying it, or why they were here now after 50 long years. But deep in her chest, something said it was connected. To Arthur, to that folded map, to the patch on his jacket. The wind began to stir again. Leaves twisted, grass bent, birds didn't return. She stood motionless, watching. Then, after 3 long minutes, the helicopter turned. Not toward the airport, not toward the town. It flew due west out of the valley, fast and sharp like it had seen what it came for. And just like that, it was gone. No one else in town saw it, or so she thought. The next morning, a knock came at Eleanor's door. She opened it slowly, expecting the mailman or maybe a curious neighbor. But instead, a young woman stood there, holding a government badge. "Ma'am," she said gently, "my name is Agent Reed. I'm with a federal unit tasked with reviewing potential anomalies on historical terrain."
Eleanor
raised an eyebrow. "That's a long way of saying you're here because of the helicopter." Agent Reed paused. "You saw it?" Eleanor smiled faintly. "I heard it in my bones." Reed stepped inside without being asked. She didn't look around like most people. She didn't judge the photos or the antique furniture. Instead, she walked straight to the kitchen table and laid down a satellite photo. This was taken 72 hours ago. Eleanor leaned in. It was an image of her land, but not as she knew it. The colors were strange. There was a heat signature, a glowing shape spanning the eastern ridge. A ring almost perfect, 20 feet wide, buried just under the surface. "That spot," Reed said, tapping it. "You ever dig there?" Eleanor looked her dead in the eye. "That's the place my husband marked." Reed's eyes narrowed slightly. "Your husband?" "He was Army recon," Eleanor said softly. "He told me the land was different." Reed studied her, expression unreadable. Then she folded the satellite image and said, "We'll be sending a team tomorrow." "For what?" "To confirm if this land is what we think it is." "And what do you think it is?" Eleanor asked, almost daring her to answer. Reed paused. "Buried history." And with that, she turned and walked out. That night, Eleanor sat by her window with both cups of tea. One for her, one for Arthur. "They're finally listening," she whispered. "Just like you said they would." Outside, the wind moved differently, gentler, like the land itself was breathing again. The next morning, trucks rumbled up the narrow dirt road that led to Eleanor's ridge. Not loud government convoys with blaring sirens. These were unmarked white vehicles, quiet and clean, with plates Eleanor didn't recognize. A crew of 6 people stepped out, dressed in dark gray uniforms. No names, no patches. Only the woman from before a giant Reed stood out, clipboard in hand and eyes that looked too serious for someone so young. Eleanor stood on her porch as they approached, her hands clasped calmly in front of her. "We'll keep the disruption minimal," Reed said. "A small, exploratory dig?" "I've waited 50 years, Eleanor replied. "Take what you need. Just leave the land with respect." Reed nodded. The team moved quickly. They unloaded tools, advanced scanners, metal detectors, small drones. But there was one piece of equipment Eleanor did recognize, an old-style sharpshooter shovel, the kind Arthur used to keep in the barn. One young technician, clearly newer than the rest, approached Eleanor while the others were setting up. He looked nervous. "Ma'am," he asked. "Yes. My name's Callan. I just wanted to say. Your husband's File Arthur Mayfield. He's kind of a legend. I read his name in a briefing packet last year. Everyone said his last mission was lost in a storm over the Pacific." Eleanor nodded slowly. "That's what they told me, too." Callan hesitated, then added, "You kept this land all these years. Did you ever think you were wrong?" She looked out toward the field, eyes soft but steady. "Every day. But I still stayed." Callan paused, then handed her a folded paper. "This was found sealed in an Army file just 6 months ago. I think you should see it." Eleanor unfolded it carefully. Inside was a black and white aerial photo dated 1973. Her land, faint circular burn in the exact spot where Arthur had marked. On the back, one sentence was handwritten: "Buried, deep, protected, do not disturb unless reconfirmed." Beneath that, Arthur Mayfield. Recon Unit 9X. Eleanor pressed the paper to her chest, whispering, "I knew it." Out in the field, the scanning equipment beeped. Reed leaned over her radio. "We've got something." 10 feet down, metallic, not natural. The team gathered in a tight circle. Shovels came out. But it wasn't the professionals who took the first dig. It was Callan, the quiet young tech, who dared to speak to Eleanor kindly. He stepped forward, shovel in hand, and looked back at her. "Mind if I do the honors?" he asked. Eleanor nodded once. Arthur would have liked that. With a clean strike, Callan broke the ground. The others followed, and within minutes, They struck something hard, metal, smooth, and curved like the edge of a buried dome. Dust was brushed away. What they uncovered was not a weapon, not a vehicle. It was something sealed, something deliberately hidden. A large, half-buried metal hatch. Faded military markings were still etched across the top, but not in English. Code numbers, glyphs, strange symbols. The digging stopped. Reed leaned in slowly, jaw tight. "Is that a vault?" Eleanor's voice rang out, soft but sure. "No, that's a memory." That evening, the crew left it uncovered but untouched, marking the area with lights and temporary fencing. The sun dipped low as shadows stretched over the ridge. Eleanor remained long after they packed up. She stood beside the hatch, not afraid, not surprised, just waiting. "I'm still here, Art," she whispered, still watching. "Just like you asked." Words spread faster than Eleanor expected. By the end of the second day, whispers were moving through Maple Ridge Valley like wildfire. "She's got government people digging out there." "Some kind of bunker, I heard." No, it's buried tech. Cold War stuff." And by day 3, the town's mayor, a nervous man named Dean Kessler, showed up unannounced at Eleanor's porch with a tight tie and sweat on his forehead. "You should have told us," he said, glancing over his shoulder toward the ridge. "People are asking questions." Eleanor didn't even offer him tea. "You never listened when I tried before," she said plainly. "That was different. Now it's public." He lowered his voice. "We're getting calls from federal offices. They're asking if your land's for sale. Someone's pushing for eminent domain." Eleanor narrowed her eyes. "You want to take the land now that you believe it's worth something?"
Ow.
Mayor Kessler cleared his throat. "No one's trying to hurt you, ma'am." "But if that thing under the dirt is government property, it isn't," she cut in. "Ours? Arthur and I protected this place." Kessler hesitated, then backed away with a weak nod. "Just be careful." That evening, a fence was erected. Not by the town, by the agency. Black mesh, floodlights, cameras. They didn't ask Eleanor. They just did it. Agent Reed knocked again. She looked troubled, her professionalism strained. "We're under pressure," she said. "Something about national interest clauses. If this is military tech, we may need to take over the site completely." "It's still my land," Eleanor replied firmly. For now, a pause. Reed softened. "But I want to help you, Eleanor. I've seen the documents. Your husband was Anti-Justricani, was assigned to Site Echo 7. That S what this hatch may be. Most Echo sites were never found." "And what were they?" Eleanor asked. Reed hesitated. "We were told they were fallback bunkers," she said. "But some files mentioned ... experiments. Monitoring zones. Things connected to deep geological resonance. Almost like the land was alive," Eleanor finished for her. Reed blinked. "Yes." By day 5, a protest began at the town square. It wasn't angry, but it was loud. Some wanted the government to leave Eleanor alone. Others demanded answers about the buried object. News vans began circling the area, and a rumor started that Eleanor's property was about to be seized by force. Late that night, Eleanor stood again on her porch. This time she could see the lights from the ridge, the site glowing behind the fence. Strange humming sounds echoed through the valley. Not mechanical, something older. The land was remembering. The next morning, Eleanor's lawyer arrived. She'd called him late the night before. He was tired, but loyal. "You want me to draft a will?" he asked. "No," she said softly. "A statement." She handed him a paper. "I want it recorded legally that whatever they find beneath my soil stays in my family's name. My husband died protecting it. I will too, if I must." He nodded. No argument. Outside, Agent Reed stood watching from a distance. That evening, just before sunset, a drone camera captured something the scanners had missed. Movement under the hatch. Not mechanical, not electrical. Pulse slow and rhythmic like the land was breathing. Reed ordered her team to halt. They didn't understand it yet, but Eleanor did. This land, it had been waiting, and now it was waking up. The next morning began with a chill in the air natural, for July. Eleanor stepped outside, to find frost creeping along the grass near the ridge. Not across the whole field, just around the hatch. Agent Reed was already there, her team surrounding the site, faces tense. No one spoke above a whisper now. The energy had shifted. "This isn't environmental," Callan muttered. "The sensors are confused. Something is affecting magnetic fields." Then a technician shouted from the mobile lab. "We picked up a signal." Everyone turned. "It's weak, but it's looping. Old frequency. Encrypted." Eleanor's heart skipped. Reed rushed inside the trailer where static played on a monitor. She adjusted knobs, cleared the interference, and then it came through, a voice crackling. "Weathered. Mail. Eco 7. Sector Green. Protocol override. This message is received. I repeat. Protect the site. Containment active. Do not open. Eco 7 priority red. Mayfield out." The trailer fell silent. Reed's eyes widened. Did he just say? "Mayfield." Eleanor stepped forward. "Play it again." And again the voice rang out. "Containment active. Do not open. Mayfield out." It was Arthur. 50 years gone. Declared dead. But his voice now pulsed across the valley like a ghostly warning. Reed backed away from the monitor, visibly shaken. "This ... changes everything," Callan whispered. "You told me he was lost over the Pacific." Eleanor didn't blink. They lied. Reed called in the senior agency handler, a cold man named Director Kang, gray suit, dark sunglasses, and a voice like static. He arrived that afternoon by chopper. He didn't greet Eleanor, didn't thank her. He just said, "Seal the perimeter. We open at dawn." Eleanor stepped forward. "My husband warned you not to open it." Kane didn't even look at her. "Your husband is presumed dead. This site is now under federal jurisdiction." But Reed spoke up. "She owns this land. We have no right." Kane turned to her sharply. "Do I need to remind you who signs your clearance?" Reed held her ground. "Sir, if we break that seal without knowing what's underneath, then we do it carefully," he said. "Orders from above." Eleanor stood still. Cold wind brushed her shawl. She turned, walked back to the house, and climbed the stairs to the attic. There she reached for an old wooden chest. Inside, letters, photographs, and finally, Arthur's field journal. She hadn't opened it in decades. The pages were yellowed, notes in pencil, maps sketched by hand. And on one page, she found it the drawing of the hatch. "If anything ever happens to me, protect this place. It's alive, El. It's not a weapon. It's a memory vault, a wound in the earth. We were told to hide it, but it watches waits." Her hands trembled. Arthur hadn't been flying over the ocean. He was assigned to Eco 7 beneath their land. The crash had been a cover-up. He was never lost. He was buried beneath her feet. At sunset, Eleanor returned to the ridge. The frost had spread wider. Lights flickered. Static buzzed in the air. She stepped to the fence, looked Kane straight in the eye, and said, "You opened that hatch without listening to him, and you'll answer to more than me." He didn't flinch, but Reed did. She looked at Eleanor, then back at the metal beneath them. "Maybe we already have." Eleanor sat alone in the attic that night, Arthur's field journal in her lap. Rain tapped gently on the roof above, and the pages lay open beneath a single bulb that flickered now and then. The old house groaned, but the sound no longer scared her. What frightened her now was the truth she had spent decades carrying. I'm sure if she had imagined it tore if the world had simply refused to believe it. But Arthur had believed it. And now, after 50 long years, so did she. She ran her hand across the worn handwriting on the page. "If the pulse strengthens, they'll come for it. Don't let them forget what we buried here. It's not just technology." That word again remembers. She turned the page. There, taped to the journal, was a sealed envelope, brittle but untouched. Across it, Arthur had written one word: "Only if they come." Her fingers shook as she opened it. Inside was a letter, and a map not of the property, but beneath it, a network of tunnels, old mine shafts, a secondary chamber beneath the hatch, and at the center, a marker labeled Burial Site Alpha, Recon Unit 9X. Tears welled in her eyes. Arthur was down there. He hadn't vanished into the sea. He died underground protecting something no one was meant to touch. Back on the ridge, Director Kane ordered his team to prepare cutting tools. "The hatch isn't opening with standard access," a tech explained. "Then we force it," Kane snapped. Agent Reed looked sick. Sir, we don't know what's on the other side, she protested. That signal we still haven't decoded the last loop. It could be a warning, it could be a failsafe. Kane didn't care. Protocol read, "We open at sunrise." Reed turned to Callan, who was quietly watching from a distance. "This isn't right." He nodded. "You feel it too?" "Yes," she whispered. "It's not just a door. It's a memory vault." She was right all along. That night, Eleanor sat by her window, the letter clutched in her hand. She finally read Arthur's last words. "Elle, if you're reading this, they came back. I stayed behind because I had to. They buried us with what we found because the world wasn't ready. But someday, someone will be. Just make sure they listen before they open it. Promise me, Elle. Promise you'll stay. Not for me, for the land it remembers." She pressed the letter to her chest, tears falling freely now. It wasn't just her fight anymore, it was his wish. The next morning, as the sky turned from black to deep violet, Eleanor walked straight through the outer fence. A guard tried to stop her. "Ma'am, this is restricted." "I lived here longer than you've worn boots," she said calmly, stepping past him with Arthur's map and journal in her hand. Agent Reed met her halfway. Her voice was quiet, shaky. "Is it true," she asked, "that your husband is down there?" Eleanor nodded. "And you're still letting us open it?" "I'm letting you choose," she said. "You can break it open like a thief, or open it like a student." Reed looked at the hatch, then back at Eleanor. Kane was already yelling, demanding the tools. But something had shifted. The frost had grown thicker, and for the first time since the digging began, the hatch vibrated softly, releasing a faint, low hum like it was trying to speak.
Oh.
The land was warning them. One last time. The town of Maple Ridge Valley woke to sirens. Not emergency sirens, but the low drone of military-grade drones circling above the ridge. A dozen new black trucks had rolled in overnight. The fence had been doubled in height. Spotlights now bathed Eleanor's land in white light. And that morning, everyone finally paid attention. Local news crews camped just outside the gates. Reporters scrambled for statements. Former skeptics' neighbors, classmates of Eleanor's long-dead son. Even the mayor gathered at the edge of the road with phones in hand, trying to make sense of it all. For the first time, people were asking questions. Why is the government here? Is something buried under her land? Was she right all along? Eleanor sat in a wooden chair on her porch, calm and steady, Arthur's journal in her lap, watching the town wake up. Inside the operation tent, Agent Reed stood her ground. "Director Kane, we have evidence that Mayfield was buried as part of a cover-up. Along with a unit known as Recon 9X, the land may contain more than military tech. It could be a memorial." Kane didn't blink. "That's not your call." "Then who made the original call to bury them?" Kane looked away. Silence. That was her answer. He knew. She pressed harder. "You can't desecrate a burial site protected by a military silence clause. That's a federal offense," Kane said coldly. "There's no proof it's a burial site." But at that moment, Callan burst in, a laptop in hand. "We cracked the last part of the transmission." He pressed play. Arthur's voice returned clearer now. "If this message plays, we are gone. Eco 7 is sealed. Do not open unless mission code Red Dawn is verified. Vault holds memory specimens, not weapons. For the love of God, don't let them turn it into one." Mayfield end transmission. Reed turned to Kane. "You want to ignore that?" Kane stared at the screen, jaw clenched. "This is above us?" Outside, the mayor's car pulled up. Kessler stepped out and shaking walked to Eleanor's porch. I didn't know," he muttered. "None of us did." Eleanor didn't smile. She simply held up Arthur's photo, the one in his recon uniform. "This man died protecting all of you," she said. "While you laughed at the widow on the hill," the mayor turned to the cameras and said the words no one expected. "This land is not for sale. It's a memorial. It belongs to the Mayfield family, and it should stay that way." The reporters turned their lenses. The crowd murmured. One child held up a hand-painted sign that read, "She was right." Kane stormed out of the tent. He approached Eleanor with clenched fists. "You've just put national security at risk, ma'am." Eleanor stood. "I buried a husband, Mr. Kane. You buried a secret. Let's see which one people remember." That evening, the hum beneath the hatch grew louder, pulsing like a heartbeat. But the ridge wasn't tense anymore. It was reverent. Locals gathered silently outside the fence, holding candles. Veterans from nearby towns stood shoulder to shoulder, saluting the hilltop as if it were sacred. Because now they understood. It wasn't just land. It was a place that remembered. At exactly 6 a.m., the hatch on the ridge began to glow. It's not from electricity, from within. A soft blue light radiated in a perfect circle around the metal seal, pulsing like a heartbeat. It didn't flash or flicker. It breathed. The agency team froze. No one touched it, not even Kane. There was no instruction in their manuals for this. Callan checked the sensors. No power surge, no temperature spike. It's responding. To what? Someone whispered. Eleanor stood just beyond the fence, wrapped in Arthur's old field jacket, her eyes fixed on the hatch. Her hands didn't shake anymore. Agent Reed walked slowly toward her. She wasn't holding a clipboard or speaking like an official. This time, her voice was quiet, respectful. "Eleanor, if you tell us to walk away, we will." Eleanor said nothing at first. She stepped forward, past the fence, past the floodlights. She moved with purpose and silence, her boots sinking into the frosty grass, until she stood inches from the hatch. Then she bent down slow and placed Arthur's journal gently on top. The blue glow pulsed once more, then dimmed, and the hatch once sealed tight-clicked. It's not open. Locked, as if the land itself had made a decision. Eleanor stood, whispered 3 words to the wind. "He remembers now, so do you." And she turned and walked away. There was no explosion, no government press release, no forced evacuation. Oh. The crew packed up quietly the next morning. Kane never returned. The agency left behind one small marker upon Eleanor's request. A single black stone placed beside the sealed hatch, engraved with the words, "ECH07, what is buried here remembers. Honor it in silence." They didn't disturb the soil again. It's not after what happened. The town changed after that. The ridge became sacred ground, not commercialized, not televised, no plaques or museums. Just a fence, a trail, and a simple bench with Arthur Mayfield's name carved by hand. Veterans came and sat there in silence, while children left drawings and folded flags. And Eleanor? She never told the full story. She didn't need to. We simply returned every morning with 2 cups of tea and sat facing the hill. She didn't talk to the land anymore. She listened. Eleanor Mayfield passed away quietly on a Thursday morning. There was no hospital, no crowd, just her wrapped in the same shawl she wore every morning, sitting in a rocking chair facing the ridge. Both teacups were still warm, and in her lap, folded carefully, was Arthur's final letter. The wind that day was gentle. No storm, no thunder, just a long exhale, as if the land itself had sighed. The town mourned her in ways no one had expected. The mayor ordered flags at half-mast. The veterans who once ignored her now marched through Maple Ridge in silence, holding a hand-painted banner. She kept the watch. Local children lit candles along the fence, placing small pebbles with messages written in marker. "Thank you for staying. We believe you now." We kept the memory alive. Agent Reed returned, but not in uniform. She came alone, walking the trail Eleanor had worn into the dirt with decades of silent steps. She reached the bench beside the sealed hatch and sat. From her coat she removed something, a framed photo of Eleanor and Arthur, taken the year before he vanished. She placed it beside the marker stone, then pressed her hand to the cold earth. "I'll protect it now," she whispered, "just like you did." Agency never came back. No one tried to dig. And every year on the same day, a helicopter circled the valley once, but never landed. Locals called it the Watcher. Some said it was the agency, checking the site. Others believed it was something else entirely, something deeper, a quiet salute from the sky. Years passed and stories faded, as they always do. But not Eleanor's, because the ridge never forgot. The wind still carried her name. Sometimes just after dawn, hikers swore they could see an old woman sitting on the bench, shawl over her shoulders, eyes on the horizon, always watching, always waiting. On the marker stone, one line was added after her passing. She listened when no one else would. Final emotional pull: some heroes don't wear uniforms. Some don't speak loudly, some simply stay. And because they stay, the world remembers what it almost forgot. The end.